let me introduce you to Linda and Paul Fusco. And I just have to get my notes here. Linda was the technical supervisor for ALF, and also composer for Santa's Magic
Toy bag
series. Okay. Paul, as you probably know, was the creator of ALF, and was also the producer, writer, director, puppeteer, actor, and voice specialist. ALF series ran for 4 years, I think 102 shows on primetime NBC television. Numerous awards, including 2 Emmys and the People's Choice Award. There was, I guess, 2004 to 2006, ALF's hit talk show, which I did see a lot about online. TV Land Awards, a celebration of classic TV. Project ALF, which was a 1994 film. Space Cats, 1992 TV series. Animated Adventures of ALF, 1987. Let's see, the Showtime Holiday Specials, 6 family specials of Showtime executive producer, director, and writer, and it goes on and on. So what John and I want to do is, first of all, welcome to the class.
Thank you.
And part of what we want to ask is, I think, some technical questions and some more abstract questions, but also, I guess, to begin with, and there was a wonderful interview with Rebecca Ransom in the Litchfield County Times. Paul and I talked a little bit last night on the phone, and then tonight at dinner, we realized that the 3 of us grew up in Hamden.
That's right. Yeah.
About, I don't know, 3 to 5 miles from each other. And so that was kind of interesting. But tell them how you came to this line of business at a fairly young age.
Well, we were lucky enough. I went to Hamden High School, and we were lucky enough to have a TV studio in our high school, which was quite extraordinary. And they had called for people to come down and volunteer to work in the TV studio, and I went down there, and I knew exactly that's what I wanted to do. It was just the most incredible experience to be able to see images right away on videotape. And
2-inch, by the way.
2-inch, that's 2-inch videotape. It was 2-inch videotape, reel to reel. That was the standard back then, before it became what it is today. Yeah.
And also, though, you were saying that you had an early interest in magic.
Yes, early interest in magic and ventriloquism.
Right.
So I was like performing when I was 10 or 11 years old, doing kids' birthday parties, and anywhere people would see me.
Now, what did you? I had a Jerry Mahoney.
I had a Jerry Mahoney too, as a matter of fact.
But my lips moved.
So did Jerry's. Yes, well, we found out later that was part of the thing. Ventriloquism is you're not supposed to move your lips, but we didn't know at that time. But neither did Edgar Bergen.
Right,
right. Anyway, but yes, Jerry Mahoney was an inspiration, and I was very fortunate to become friends with Paul Winchell in his later years. Yeah.
Because that was a television show.
Paul Winchell dominated television from 1940 to the 70s.
I was going to say.
Yeah, he was on TV. He had many, many shows. I don't know if anybody remembers Paul Winchell.
I don't know. There's a few of us with gray hair.
No, but I was just a kid, though.
Yeah. So I think in part of what you were saying, and then Linda and you met.
We met at the television studio and
at the high school.
Linda was a Hamden High School graduate as well.
So what brought you into that studio? Besides Paul, or no?
Next-boyfriend? No. No, the same interest.
She didn't want to go to class.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Theater does provide that.
It was a way to get out of class, yeah.
No, but it was also the same interest in photography and what the images were and what was going on at that time. It was a beginning.
And I think you also said that because it was in the high school, and the whole TV station had been donated.
Right.
So
all the
that-
equipment was donated by, it was the Southern Connecticut Telephone Company that they were doing, they would do industrials and in-house videos, and
Right.
they had upgraded their equipment and they donated it to the high school as a tax write-off.
And so an opportunity of a lifetime.
Oh, unbelievable! Yeah,
Yeah.
And we would do debates. They would bring in the mayors. We'd do mayoral debates. We even did remember a Senate debate. We'd have them, and a lot of the classes that were in the drama, we
Yeah.
would come and do plays, and we would stage the plays, and we were doing some pretty sophisticated things.
Now, have you gone back there? And
I taught there.
Oh, you
I
did?
I went back and taught there. I've got to remember what the years were. It was the late
It was in the late
70s,
70s.
early 80s.
Uh-huh.
I went back and took over the job of the audiovisual director at the high school for about 6 years, 7 years.
so that must have been
So
great.
it was frightening to go back to your high school, and a lot of the teachers that I had
Oh, yeah.
were still there, and suddenly you're in the faculty
Faculty
room
lounge.
having cigarettes and finding out that they all have miserable lives too. So yeah.
How gratifying.
How gratifying. It was just, all these perfect teachers that you thought were just wonderful people, and you find out that, it's a long
They all
story.
know.
Yeah.
They all.
Yeah, they all have
Yeah.
these secret things hidden in their closet.
But to tie this all in, it was while he was working at the high school that he began our career in, we got a contract with Showtime to do the 6 holiday specials for Showtime, and some of the editing he did at the high school on high school equipment, and it was because there weren't the editing houses, there weren't the opportunities that there are now. But it was while he was doing that job that he had that drive to get out
Yeah.
there and raise the money and say, I really need to do something different
Which is
here.
the tough part, am I correct?
Yes, very
Having
tough.
a belief system,
Yeah.
having, I don't know how I'm going to take this first step, I just know I have to.
Sometimes
And-
ignorance is bliss.
Right.
We did our first TV show. I hooked up with a guy, and this is how I got interested in puppets. A fellow friend had worked for the Muppets. And I had this TV experience, and he had come back from working with the Muppets, and he said, hey, we should do something with puppets and TV. And we came up with this idea of a Halloween special, which we thought would be kind of fun, with all these creatures and everything. It takes place underground, and it was an all-puppet thing. And we did a budget, and we raised the money. It cost the first production, it was $50,000 it cost us to do it. And we raised $50,000 with private investors.
Wow.
And we rented out a warehouse in Cheshire, Connecticut.
Yeah.
And no, the first one was in Hamden. Sorry, we rented out an industrial warehouse and rented
everything
video,
in.
brought everything in, went to a scene shop, built the scenery, got the equipment and everything.
Don't know how we did it.
And they tell you now the stupidest thing you could ever do is to put your own money into a show because you go out and you get a network or somebody to give you the money. But we didn't know, and we were lucky. And the show had enough merit to it that someone at Showtime saw this. And then when we finished this show, we had this reel under our arm, and we had nowhere to show it. We was like say, "Oh, maybe CBS is going to buy this," and we got a meeting with CBS, and we showed it to them. And it wasn't up to CBS standard broadcast quality, but it was still pretty good. And we ended up finding a fellow that was an agent, and he looked at it and he said, "This is good. There's some interesting stuff on the screen." And he sold it to Showtime, and Showtime said, "Hey, this is good. We want 5 more."
Wow.
And that's how we got started doing it. It was very lucky, very, very lucky, but, being at the right place at the right time.
Yep.
But if we did not have the drive or the impetus to do this on our own, we would have never had it. By not having that reel of tape under our arms, we would have never sold it. And that was a good
So
start.
you left after that?
Yes,
teaching.
yes. I was lucky that I was able to take a leave of absence from I could take a year off without, any...
Yeah.
And I did that. I never went back, though. I took the year off, and then by that time I was working at Disney. I ended up, from doing these shows, somebody at Disney was doing a show on the Disney Channel that was just starting out called Dumbo Circus. And originally we were supposed to produce that show, but it never came to fruition. They wanted to use someone in Los Angeles, but they hired me to come on as a performer, writer, producer, consultant, and it brought me out to Los Angeles, where I was able to get an agent. And the interesting thing about this Halloween special that I talked about 4 episodes ago, we had a puppet shop that we were building all these characters, and out of this puppet shop came this weird-looking thing that looked like Alf. And I kind of always liked this character. I said, this is a funny character. There's something to do with, I don't know, I just kept this character in the back. And by having this puppet, I sort of infused this personality to it. And I had this puppet with me when I went out to Los Angeles. So as I was out there, I kept him in a garbage bag, in like a giant hefty bag. And I used to bring him out at parties and, walk around and insult people with him, basically. And you can get away with murder, by the way, doing that, because it's not me,
It's not me, it's him.
So there was an agent at a party, and he says, wow, he said, this character is really very funny. What is he? I said, well, he's a space alien, and, you got to cut him a little slack. And from there, he said, we're going to take you to NBC, and that's how I got to go to NBC. And the funny story, this is a story of Brandon Tartikoff, who was running NBC at the time. He wrote this in his book. He said it was one of the funniest pitch sessions he ever sat through. We walked into this huge, and here I am now. This is big time for me. I walk into NBC. It's the conference room. It's me, my partner, and an agent. And I'm walking to the meeting with a garbage bag. They have no idea what I've got in my garbage bag. And I'm like, they're looking at me like, this guy brought a garbage bag with him. Okay. And I think I made some kind of joke like, it's my laundry. I'm going to do my laundry after the meeting. I just have to, And I put it, and we sat at the table, and I put the bag under the table, and nobody even remembered I had it. And Brandon Tartikoff was sitting at the head of the table. I was to his left. My partner, Tom Patchett, who Patchett and Tarsus. Tom Patchett did Bob Newhart Show. He did Buffalo Bill. He did numerous television shows, MTM. He did Carol Burnett Show. Anyway, he sits there, and we're sitting across the table. There's 4 NBC executives, and Brandon's at the head, and they're like this, just like, okay. You've got 4 minutes. Impress us.
Yeah.
And Tom said, well, it's a story about this alien, and it comes from outer space, and it's this, and it's that. And I could see, I'm reading these eyes, and I'm watching people's eyes just go like this. It's like, it's not, we're dead. We're dead. And the agent says, look, he says, before you guys pass, he says, I want you to meet the character. And he kicks me under the table, and he says, bring out the garbage bag. So I take out the garbage bag, and I brought Alf up, and they had no idea that I had this with me. And Alf, I held him against the table so it looked like he was seated at the table next to Brandon Tartikoff. And now there's dead silence in the room, and everybody's like, okay, what's this character going to do that's funny, that's going to sell this show? Obviously you're expecting a hysterical line to break the ice. They didn't get it. All Alf did, they're staring at Alf, Alf's staring back at them, he's looking around the room, kind of sizing everyone up, and then just decides to pick his nose and wipe it on Brandon Tartikoff. And brought the room down. Brandon's laughing so hard he couldn't talk. He slammed his hand on the table because that's hysterical. And he was, by the end of the meeting, he was actually looking into Alf's eyes
and
talking to him directly, like I was invisible. And he said, tell me why should I put you on my network? And Alf says, well, because you need me. You got crap on your network. He said, you need something funny. You got to get with it, man. He said, you guys got a pilot, and we ended up getting a pilot from that meeting.
Now, when you said that you were creating those other puppets, and then there was one that you had this affinity with, who in time became Alf, right? So, what was it? Can you remember what it was about?
About the character itself?
About the character that distinguished it from whatever the other were that you felt an affinity with it.
I liked the way it looked.
Yeah.
And
pretty much the same?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, there were some changes made in the final Alf, but There's a funny thing. Does acting? You have acting majors here. People do acting.
Well,
there's an interesting thing that happens. I don't have any acting background. I never did anything like that. But when you have a character, and a puppeteer will tell you this, when you infuse a character, it's going to sound so weird. It's going to sound like something from magic, but when you give a puppet a character, it's a lot of your soul. And there's a weird thing that happens when you get to know this character. So you put this character on and you look in the mirror and you watch the way it moves, and you kind of like, the mirror is your best vision. It's like a camera. And you get to see the way it moves, and it's kind of like, I started looking at that this character's got some funny mannerisms. This puppet can do some gestures that I think are funny. And then you start experimenting with what the voice is like. And I went through a few voices for what he was. Originally, Alf was a very really gruff kind of my character. I based it on Jim Henson had a character called Rolf the dog. I don't know if you remember Rolf the piano playing dog.
Yeah.
And his character was, this is Rolf the dog, and I'm playing to tickle the old ivories, And I said, I like that kind of character. I like that bravado that character has. So I kind of gave it that little thing, and
That didn't last too long.
no.
Your voice couldn't
sustain it.
Well, yes.
This is something, the first few episodes of Alf, first season, you'll hear Alf with a different voice. It's very, like that, and by the end of the week, I just had laryngitis, I couldn't do it. So I had to find another voice. But anyway, so the character came from, and I used to torment her in the house with this character. He'd pop up she'd be making the bed, and this character would pop up from the side of the bed and, do one-liners on her, and she hated this thing. She really did, honestly, she hated it. And I said, someday this is going to make you a lot of money, just relax. But I was honing my material because I could get away with it, and whenever she saw me with this thing on my hand, believe me, she ran. She ran. But that's how it came to be, and I said, this is funny because he could be the house guest, the house guest that never left, the man who came to dinner.
Yeah.
I said, that's the funny premise about this thing. People get stuck with this obnoxious character. He's somebody's brother-in-law, he's just came for the visit and he never left. And I said, this is funny. He crashes in, and then you build your story from there. So how do I explain his look? Well, he's an alien. Well, how did he get here? Well, he crashed. Why is he not leaving? Well, he can't go back. So you start to get your story, and it you start making up a whole history about who this character is. And at one time, and I still do in my head, I know Al's whole family. I know his relationship with his mother. I know his children, his brothers and sisters, his whole relationship with and his friends and everything. So you have to know that as a writer. You have to know that.
Exactly. I was going to say, part of what you were saying a few minutes ago about that mystery that gets communicated from the puppet that you've created is like when James Baldwin used to say, when he's writing, the character will take you where you need to go.
Absolutely.
And I'm hearing that same thing.
The best thing that can happen to you as a writer is when the character talks to you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's television, if it's a book, if it's a narrative, whatever it is, if you know that character that well, when you sit down at that keyboard, you hear that character's voice in your head.
Yeah.
And you'll also know whether the line or whether the speech is right for that character. There are times when, bad comedy writing is when you could take a comedy script and I could give you his line, you could take mine. It doesn't matter who says the line. If it's a funny line, you'll get the joke. If it's a funny line, you'll get the joke. But it's not coming from your character.
Right. Yeah.
And
it's a line.
That's bad writing. But when you look at a line and say, you'll say this character would never say that line, or this character would say that line. That's how you really get into, I believe, the elements of good writing.
And I think when you just said that piece about writing the entire history, the bio, in acting, having directed years ago, you say to the actor, I want you to create the history, the family history. What kind of coffee, was he left divorced, what kind of deodorant, have to know everything.
Sure.
Then you ask the actor to write it all out. The actor isn't going to use it in that production, but the actor knows
it's the foundation.
everything.
It's the foundation.
So it's
it's the same thing. Yeah.
He just has a third dimension to bring it into reality.
Right, exactly.
And I'll tell you, I'll take this another step further, if you want to talk about weird. Many a time when I would be writing an episode of Alf, and I couldn't come up with a funny line for him. You know, I'd say, okay, you know from structure, you have to go out on a joke here, and Alf needs a funny line. We need a line for Alf. I just couldn't think of it. If I put Alf on my hand, Alf would tell me what the line was.
I believe.
I could channel through the character,
Yeah.
almost as if I didn't even think of it. It's like, okay, what would you say in this instance? And
He'd tell you.
bam, right there. You tap into something that...
Well, we talked about on the phone the fact that Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was romantic, those of you who've taken the romantics, wrote Biographia Literaria and was a literary critic, and said that in theater, what's so important when somebody comes in and sits down in a darkened theater or a movie theater, or I guess in your own living room, there's something called the willing suspension of disbelief.
Absolutely.
And the audience suspends all disbelief when something happens in front of them, whether it's live, television, film.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I looked at all the countries around the world that show ALF still.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything from Argentina to Sweden to Slovakia. I mean,
Are we all in Slovakia?
I have Slovakia here.
I wonder how it translates.
So
Did you do the translation?
No.
but what happens, obviously, is there's something there
Well,
that suspends globally all disbelief and is able to resonate. And the piece you and I, when we were walking back, the second episode that you saw tonight, I said, Paul, were there tears in Alf's eyes? Because I've seen that episode 3 times recently, and I could swear there are literal, water in his eyes, and you said no.
one of the highest compliments that Max Wright paid me, the fellow that plays Willie, we did a scene once where Alf accidentally picks up a lingerie catalog, and he said to me, I don't know if it's my imagination or what, but I thought I saw Alf blush. I said, no, I'm not that good. He said, well, he said, I read into it, and I saw
just
him.
as I did.
I saw him blush. So I said, well, I did that, yeah.
And we had said about Max Wright being such a great
foil,
off
perfect foil
of Alf, and
foil.
how did you find him? How did you pick him? Because he's able to do that sort of farcical, really big farce moves, playing against that.
They wanted us to replace him, after we did the pilot. They test these shows. The NBC they do all these test focus groups and everything, and the paperwork came back that Max Wright was not a solid father figure. He wasn't your typical father figure. They were looking for Hugh Beaumont or something. I don't know. And we said, yes, that's what we like about him, because he's so quirky and he's so offbeat, and he's such a great actor, because what he does, he makes it look so easy. He's playing against a puppet, and he talk about that disbelief. But anyway, the way we got Max Wright was he had done a show called Buffalo Bill with Tom Patchett and Jay Tarsis, and Tom knew him. Tom had worked with him on many other shows, and he just said, this guy's perfect for this, because he knew what he could do. And I went with his instinct, because I didn't know. And for what he does is so hard. It's so hard, yeah. But, and we fought tooth and nail, and we said, no, we need this kind of character for Alf to play. It's Laurel and Hardy. You can't change Oliver Hardy. You can't change. He has to be that comic foil. Yeah. And comedy is what they say. Dying is easy. Comedy is hard.
Yes,
to get that chemistry of Alf and Willie. I take 50% of that, but Max Wright is the other 50%. Most of the funniest moments we've ever had in the show have been between Max and Alf.
But let us also divide up Alf into the other people that helped bring him to life. I mean, you were certainly the creative channel that Alf came through, but you had a lot of support that channeling comes into with the other hand, with the electronics, with the support group that all work together, which is very different than a single person on stage. You're one person on stage. You're one writer who's writing a book you have control over everything. When you're doing what Paul had been doing, you have a support group.
Yeah, it
that
takes 3
all-
people to operate ALF, so they'll know, yeah.
That's,
So-
I was
Yeah, it's
wondering
3 people.
about how much complete, well, since you're creator, writer, director, producer, and technical.
Caterer,
Okay.
I catered the episodes too. I'm an
So,
excellent cook.
so, complete artistic control, but then my question, then
Yeah.
you're with NBC.
Yeah.
So there's,
Here's the beauty about having a hit show. By the first season, by the end of the first season, we were on our way to becoming a hit. And by the second season, we were number 7 in the ratings. And we were able to tell NBC to go away. The first season, they had volumes of notes. One of them, which was that they thought it would be very funny if Alf played against a black kid, a little black. This was the generation, the era of Webster
Oh, yeah.
and Gary Coleman. So they were looking for the next Gary Coleman, and they said, "Oh, this is hysterical! Alf and Gary Coleman. What's funnier than that?" And I said, "Drying paint is funnier than that. That's the most unfunny thing I've ever heard of." And they would throw these things in. Alf with a monkey. Wow. How funny would that be? Alf with a monkey. He's got a pet monkey, and he's got this. And you listen to it for the first season. You listen to it, and then finally, when we were on our way, and we just said, "Go away. We'll call you when we need you." And that was great. And they knew to back off. But there's so many stories about how executives can kill a show.
yeah.
One of Brandon Tartikoff's greatest lines was, "If it's got a midget or a monkey in it, it's a hit." He really believed that, and so I said.
So I was going to ask Linda, as technical supervisor, exactly what were you doing in the show? Where were you sort of the reflection of the audience?
Yeah, what were you
how,
doing in
How
the
were
show?
you?
I'd like to know, too.
What,
Were you there?
What did you do all those years?
I was on stage all week while Paul was off doing other things in addition to writing and supervising writing sessions. He was also doing all of the publicity and also approving all of the product
Yeah.
merchandising and everything. So I would spend the day on the set and watch the run-throughs, watch where they were going to, what the action was going to be, because it's not just like someone walking out onto a
Right,
stage.
right.
You had to, the set was 4 feet off the ground. You had to figure out.
Alf is not angle proof. There's certain ways that he has to be shot, so you don't give it away. And that was one of the things that Linda did, is she made sure that, because we would have rotating directors that would come in, and
So each one had to.
she would tell them, yes, you could do it this way, this is a bad angle.
No, he's not going to do that.
Yeah. A lot of, as a compliment to me, most of the people didn't think it was a puppet. And they would, even the writers didn't understand how Alf worked.
Right.
And I would get these scripts, these first drafts, Alf's on a skateboard juggling. It's like, wait, you can't do that. There's certain things. Alf rides a bicycle. Well, that's a $2 million shot with Alf riding a bicycle. Kermit did it. It cost him a lot of money. But, they would say, well, why can't you do that? And I say, look, have you ever seen how we do the show?
Don't you ever watch the...
Did you ever watch rehearsal? But that was, they always thought he could do everything. But Linda was there to keep everything on track. And I did not like to rehearse. So during the week, I would not probably be on the stage a lot of the time, and she was there to make sure that...
and there was someone called Ralph.
Alf had a stand-in called Ralph.
The rehearsal.
Rehearsal Alien Life Form, RALF, Ralph. And that's right.
Which is also your father's name.
Yeah, which is also, it's also my father's name, but he's not an alien. At least we don't think he is, anyway. So, we would rehearse with another puppet it was actually a reject Alf that...
Who was in the last show that you just saw?
that drive-by scene there in the last show?
Yes.
That was
the,
Ralph, that was the stand-in
in the car.
Yeah.
In the car.
Yeah, that was his only on-camera appearance.
Wow. It was
A little
quick.
piece of trivia.
Yeah, little piece of trivia. It was the only time he was on camera.
I had a question that there seemed to be, for a period on television, I guess I'm going to call it a kind of genre that dealt with, well, I'm dating myself, but that's okay. So My Favorite Martian, okay, and Mork and Mindy, okay? And more recently, Third Rock from the Sun.
Mm-hmm.
And in film, E.T. I'm choosing those because they're all benign as opposed to menacing aliens.
Mm-hmm.
So was there any inspiration from those? No.
Actually,
Yours was,
when I was tormenting her with this character
Right.
behind the bed and everything, it was before, it predated E.T. It was
Okay.
actually before E.T. But no, I mean, none of it was inspirational in the sense that he became an alien because that was the best way to explain him, you know, to explain
Okay.
what he was and what he looked like.
And I'll just interject this too. Paul was under, for whatever inspiration we all get, he just said, you know what, it's time for another Mickey Mouse. There's time for another Barney. He said, I know I have it in me. I don't know what it is. And maybe that's why this one character stuck around until his personality
Yeah,
came out.
yeah.
But was that somewhere, something
Working,
struck
yeah,
him
yeah.
to say, this is an inspiration. I need to, somehow I have to come up with this next,
pay attention to what was
what's
going
in
on.
there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he did. He did pay
I
attention.
mean, I'm back to
that.
Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, so.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they speak very highly of you. Just want to let you know.
Well, Fran's not.
Well, thank
Fran's
you.
not around anymore.
No.
Yeah, but Kukla is.
Yeah, and
Ollie-
Ollie was
Ali,
It's not looking
Gone.
too good.
he's not too well.
Not too well.
You might want to
That
send him a
tooth.
card.
right,
Yeah,
that one
he's
dragon.
got a big
yeah.
cavity
Yeah.
in the middle of it.
But, and you were,
Cancerous.
you were talking about, the week where you're on stage and working with the director to make sure how the angles are and doing the rehearsals. So, I mean, when you have a weekly show that you're doing and you have so much responsibility for, give an idea of what your week is like and how, and one of the things I think people don't realize about television is that there's usually not a writer, that it's usually
Right.
lots of writers
Right.
and there's a story editor and how you move those things along. If you can give some sense of how that works, because
Yeah.
it's so different than other, film and other experiences.
Well, I would. How many people would you say we like 65, 70 people that we employed, maybe more, right?
Well,
Really?
our shoot week was a lot different than other sitcoms.
Right. It took 2 days to shoot the
To
show.
shoot the show. We did not shoot in front of a live
We
audience.
could not do it. We tried it at the beginning. We tried it, and there was so much setup time
Every
between
time you
scenes
moved
that
out
you would
from
lose
one
the
room
audience.
to
They would
another
be
room,
sitting
you had
there. They'd watch one scene, and then we'd have to strike and change
Oh,
everything
yeah.
technically. And so we ended up not doing it that way. But it's a pretty rigorous schedule. We would be at work at 6:00. I mean, our typical day would be Monday. I'd be in at 6:00 because of all the other things that we'd have to do. And to give you an idea, at 6:00 in the morning, I would go up the stairs, get a cup of coffee, and go to my office, and there'd be 8 people waiting in line at my door to talk to me.
Then.
All right, and I haven't had my coffee yet, so it would start there. On Monday, you do the table read, which is the first time everybody sits around the table and reads the script, all the actors and all the writers and everything, and you do it in a rehearsal. So maybe by 8 o'clock, we would do the table read. And that was the episode we were going to do for the day, for the week. And at that time, the writers would and it's a staff of writers. When you write comedy is a collaborative. Most of the time, all the time in television, it's collaborative. There's different writers. Sometimes you bring in a gag writer, a guy that could punch up a script. Sometimes they bring a writer in at the end of the week that will look at the script and say, okay, you're missing a joke over here or whatever. This is
Yeah,
how the
they
comedy
structure
world
it, yeah.
works. But it's a staff of writers. They're hearing it for the first time with the actors, and they hear where all the laughs are and where the laughs aren't. That should be. So they'll make their notes, and they'll take their notes after the read-through and go upstairs to the writer's room and start rewriting
Well,
while we're rehearsing.
While they go and rehearse
While we
what
go
they
rehearse.
have.
So now we've got your director and the actors, and you're on the stage, and you block. You block and rehearse, and you read it. And by the end of that day, you would get new pages. You would get pages that were changed for the jokes or whatever. It could be 1 page, 2 pages, sometimes 50 pages. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And it's constantly evolving. Tuesday, the same thing. You would do a read-through. You would get everything blocked. At the end of the day on Tuesday, was it Tuesday or by Wednesday?
Wednesday was the final run-through.
By Wednesday, the final, Tuesday is the same thing, rehearsal. By Wednesday, again with the pages, Wednesday night, at 4 o'clock, you would do a rehearsal, a dress rehearsal for just the writers and the staff and everything. And they would look at the final.
Well, and the first year, the NBC did come.
NBC would come, right.
And
right.
sit.
Yeah, they would sit and give you their notes of what they thought was funny. And so then by 4 o'clock, 4:30, you're doing your run-through, and if you should pretty much have your show, ready to go at that point. And we were short one day, because most shows do one-day taping. Live shows, they do a taping on a Friday. They do two tapings in front of a studio audience. They do a 5 o'clock taping and an 8 o'clock taping, and that's it. And they combine the two episodes. They take the best of the two, and they cut them together. We were short one day because it took us 2 days to shoot it. So by the end of that day, if there were any changes, people would have them delivered to their house at night for the next morning. Sometimes you'd walk in the morning ready to do a scene, and there'd be new pages. And the shoot days were long and really, really tedious because of the technical setup and aspect of it. And by the end of Friday night, sometimes we'd go after midnight into overtime. But we'd get the show done by Friday and sleep Saturday and Sunday.
And then
it all starts again on Monday.
Wow. Rigorous.
Yeah, it was. But and it was so rigorous that we were only able to do 3 shows in a row.
I was going to ask you how.
And then we'd have to take a week off.
Okay.
So our production schedule was 3 shows, 1 week off, 3 shows, 1 week off. We tried doing 4 in a row. There were times when we had to do 4 in a row.
And it was horrible.
And people were just fried. It was just a lot.
You lose that momentum. You lose the excitement. You just don't want to see anybody anymore.
Yeah, it was so. It's tough, but and one of the things I don't like about rehearsing comedy is when you do the first time you do the joke, it's funny. When you rehearse that same joke 75 times. It's not funny anymore. Yeah. And I never liked, if I didn't believe in the joke, I didn't like doing it after 75 times. So I always like to save it for the camera, and the great thing about having a guy like Max Wright, too, is there were many times after we get the scene in the can, it was the way it was written, and we'd say, all right, let's do one more. And I would go off the page. I would throw stuff out to see whether or not he would respond and what kind of reaction I could get from him. And he was right there. He was
one of the only actors
that could do that. The other actors would go, wait, what's he? He's off the page. He doesn't have that line. He's not supposed to say that. It's like, all right, cut.
Yeah, well, he was. He's a stage actor.
Yes.
He did a lot of stage
classically
work
trained.
And classical, and in fact, I think he was at Long Wharf Theater. I think he did some classical things at Long Wharf.
He's coming back to Long Wharf. He told me he's going to be doing something in Massachusetts this summer too.
Yeah.
At the Williamstown
Theater Festival. Yeah, because when you're on stage, you're used to things happening, and you just have to keep going.
Yeah.
Because when you're on stage and somebody says something wrong, or the scenery falls down, it doesn't matter. You just keep going. So you just stay with it.
So his class, that was helpful in the training of. And I learned so much from him as an actor. One of the things I say, one thing is to be an actor, but what a good actor does is he reacts. Mm-hmm. It's not always about, you could have the line and be talking, but it's about me reacting to you.
And then he could steal a scene from you, even though it's your line.
Even though
right.
And if you could steal a scene from Alf, you're very good.
And so. When you were working, how much were you in it? How much were you working in advance? I mean, when you're doing a show a week, you do 3 shows and then a break. I mean, how many weeks ahead are you in terms of broadcast?
We were probably 4 weeks ahead in broadcast. Yeah, and maybe 2 weeks ahead with scripts, which was I always loved to go. I was one of the few producers. I was a stickler about this. When we would gear up to go back into production, I wanted to make sure we had 5 scripts ready to go. And most people said, well, you're crazy. I would bring the writers in early and make sure that we had, because you get a better product. You have that much more time to look at the work, and you're constantly fiddling with it.
And consistency, too, no?
Yes, yes. So that was my big thing. I
Yeah.
always like to come into the season with maybe 4, maybe 5, at least storylines, definitely storylines, but it helped. It helped.
Should we,
Yeah,
actually, I know some of the students told me last week that they had like elf dolls and elf sleeping bags and all that stuff, so they know a lot about elf, so.
Bless you for buying those.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's right. He got his suit because of that.
That's right. It's paid for this jacket. It's got a little stuff on it here.
So, questions from the audience? Since you didn't have
Or
to.
comments.
You didn't have to email.
One at a time now. Let's not all.
You didn't have to email me questions ahead of time, so I said I expected that you would have questions in the class. So,
Yes.
listen.
I don't know how it worked for you back then, but if you're a writer for, say, comedy, whatever, do you have to actually audition? How do you audition writers?
Well, good question. Very good question. A lot of the writers you would have known their work from other shows. When you're looking for writers, the agents start submitting scripts of their clients. And I gave a lot of writers starts on my show that went on to do some pretty big shows. Gene and Mike Reese, who have been with The Simpsons for 15 years. I started them. They were writing one-liners for Johnny Carson, and also another writer by the name of Victor Fusco, who was this young kid who came into town with a stack of scripts under his arm. Just anybody who could read these scripts. And he came in one day. I took a meeting with him, and I said. I read one of his scripts and I thought it was funny, and I didn't know whether he could write for ALF. I said, you come in next week, and I want you to give me 4 storylines. You tell me, you come in with 4 original storylines for ALF, and we'll see where it goes. And he came in with 4 hysterical storylines. And I gave him a deal. I said, okay, I will give you a script deal. We will pay you to write a script. And he wrote the script. It was very funny. And that was a pretty safe thing to do, because if the script wasn't funny, I would have thrown it into the room with the writers, and they would have fixed it and made it. But he knew the structure and everything, and the next year we put him on staff.
Did he have an agent, Paul?
Yeah,
Well,
I think he
everybody
did
has to
have an
have an
agent. I think he
agent.
did have. It's very hard. If you wanted to get it used to be like if you were a big fan of Will and Grace, and you wanted to write for Will and Grace, you would write a spec script for Will and Grace, and you would send it to the producers, and if they read it, they don't do that anymore. There's so many legalities involved in it that if you're not a member of the Writers Guild, if it's not, yada, 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 you stole somebody's idea, they can't look at that script, and if it's not good or if they don't want to use it, they can't read it legally, because if there's somebody else that writes a story that's similar to that, they're going to say they stole your idea. So it doesn't usually work that way. But if you have an agent, or you have a propensity to write comedy, then you write those spec scripts anyway. You write that Will and Grace, you write The Simpsons, whatever it is your favorite show is, that you know those characters, and you get an agent to read them and say, these are good. These look like they're real Simpson scripts and everything, and they will start to put your name out there and say, here's this young artist, this young writer, not really published yet, but read some of her stuff. It's kind of funny. She knows your show very well. Take a meeting with her.
And I knew someone when I was living in New York City that was a playwright and got a job writing for a daytime soap. And when they went through that, they had 2 positions for the daytime soap. They started with 400 writers, and they got down to 2. And she got one of those jobs. And every stage of it, you had to write a script using the characters of that show. So you had to know those characters cold, and they would give you
And
a
their
situation,
history,
and you had to write it. And you had 2 days to write it and get it back to them. So that's, how they winnow it down.
Here's a funny writing story. You have another question? A friend of mine wanted to write a spec script for that show. It was called Heart to Heart.
I remember that.
Remember that show? What was the female?
Robert Wagner.
Robert-
and,
Stephanie Powers.
Stephanie Powers. Okay. And he wrote this script. Stephanie Powers is the key to this story. He wrote this wonderful story where whatever it was, and he took a meeting with the producer, and they brought him in, and they had the script in front of him, and they said, we're passing on this script. We love it, but we're passing on it. And he says, well, I don't understand why you're passing on it. Why won't you buy it from me? He said, in scene 9 on page 35, you have Stephanie Powers jumping in a pool to save a guy's life. said, yeah. He goes, she doesn't get her hair wet. You don't know this character at all. And that's it.
Yeah.
He didn't get the job. Where if you would have said, okay, we take that scene out, it's fun. They don't get that. They don't get that. So he lost the job because Stephanie Power's hair was getting wet. So you had another question.
Well, also, I was just interested in the structure too, because are there people that just write storylines? You know, if you're really good at coming up with storylines, you got to do the whole thing and then work out when you get together who does what.
There are. But you've got to be pretty established to do that. It's not. It's not a job that you would get by just pitching storylines. You would, in effect, have had to been a writer at some point, I would think. A lot of times a writer doesn't want to write the story, but he's got a story. That's why you'll see some story by, written by. You know, if I went into a meeting and I said, hey, we need an episode where Alf falls into the garbage and yada, yada, yada and everything, and I've got the story, but I don't want to write it, then I would take story by credit. But I never did, but most people would, take a story by credit. But that's a tough one, to be able to get it, to make a living just doing scenarios.
Well, and we've talked very often between ourselves about how the business constantly changes, of being able to say, submit to an agent, here's my 1-page, 2-page outline of this movie or novel that I want to do, and they would say, okay, I got it, to saying, all right, no, I need a whole script, to now going back saying, all right, just give me 2 lines about what the show's about.
Right.
So
Like
it's
a proposal,
constantly changing, and also what's constantly changing is who owns the shows.
That's interesting.
When
Right.
when we were doing ALF,
We were the last
our company
independent
owned.
production company to produce. They did these antitrust laws where originally the people that own the movie theaters couldn't be the people that were producing the movies. That's why you saw the Warner Theater, the Fox Theater, they were all
Right.
studios. They said, no, you can't do that. Originally, the networks were producing their own shows, and they were putting them on the networks, and the government came in and said, you can't do this anymore. And they had to go out and get people to do the shows for them, which is what was going on when we did it. And then they changed the law again, and they allowed the networks couldn't even own the shows. All the network did was pay you to produce the show, and they would own it for 2 runs. That was it. After the 2 runs, it came back to you. You owned the show. You owned the negative. That's how Lucille Ball made her money. That was one of the biggest coups in the world when they sold the idea of I Love Lucy, and Desi Arnaz, who was a brilliant businessman, said, what happens when you guys are finished after you run it for 2 times? So, well, we don't know. He said, well, I want them back. And he put that in his deal. He said, I get these back. They said, yeah, fine. What good are they? People have already seen them, so.
Right. Roll TV.
Yeah,
He started a trend. And anyway, we were the last independently owned company to produce and own the show, own the negative. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why we got canceled. We could have gone a 5th season, but at that time when the law changed, NBC had just started a company called NBC Studios, NBC Productions, and they were starting to develop their own TV shows. And one of the TV shows that came out of the development of NBC Studios, NBCP they called it, was The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, with this young star, Will Smith. And they did not have a spot on their schedule for a TV show that they own, so they said, well, let's cancel a show that we don't own. And that's how we got bumped, and Will Smith's show was in our time slot, Monday nights at 8 o'clock. They took our spot. And Brandon Tartikoff always used to tell me every time I used to see him at a party or something, he said, made a big mistake. You guys had another 2 seasons in you. I said, thanks a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, based on what you're just saying, after 4 seasons it ended, and you own the rights to it,
Mm-hmm.
did you try to go to other networks or other opportunities to try to continue the program?
No, we did not. But what we were promised is, if I don't know if you know the show well enough, but our last show was a cliffhanger, where Alf got caught by the alien task force. And we were told by NBC, we didn't know if we were going to come back for a 5th season or not, and we were told that if we did not get the pickup for a 5th season, they would allow us to do a movie of the week or a special so we could put closure on the series. If, in fact, we did come back for a 5th season, it would have been a new premise. What we were running out of storylines with Alf in the house. He was a shut-in, and it was the family, and we had to open him up to a new world and still keep the integrity of the character being secretive. So it would have been Alf in the military being held in this secret, like Area 51 type of thing. And he's Sergeant Bilko. He's become this horrible thing that they can't get rid of, but they can't get rid of him because they don't want people to see. And he became, he's selling chocolates. He's got the generals, and it would have been a very funny military-based Alf thing. And I always thought it was funny. So they, at the time, what happened is Brandon Tartikoff made that promise to us, and he ended up leaving NBC to go run Paramount. And the second person that replaced him never made good on that promise to pick up. So we never did it. But about a year later, we got a call from ABC, and they said, well, how come NBC dropped the ball on this? We would like to at least put closure on it for you. So they let us do a movie of the week, a 2-hour movie of the week called Project Alf, which was supposed to be what they call a backdoor pilot. If the movie was successful, they would have picked it up and made another series out of it. But we ended up getting to do a movie from it, and the movie was released in Europe theatrically. So it was, and it gave us a chance to put the closure in there.
And we were talking earlier too about how it's changed, about how you get to the networks, and how shooting your own video and stuff is a new way in. I wonder if you could talk about that some too.
Well, it's a whole different world out there, with YouTube and that's what they're looking at. Everybody's looking for that new thing, that thing that catches your eye, that flash in the pan. And most of the time, it is a flash in the pan. It's something that people are jumping on the bandwagon for, but whether it sustains or not. But there's all different new venues to get into the business. That's good. That's good news. Bad news is everybody's doing it. So for how many thousands of people that are doing it, how many of them are good? So you've got to be able to be good enough to stand out from the crowd, that people will say, wow, your video is a lot better than her video, and it's got to be that kind of thing. So, some of the stuff I've seen, that it's atrocious. They're like, putting a camera in a shopping mall and doing sped up motion and putting music to it. It's like,
But it got made. Why?
Well, it got made barely, but I don't think. Andy Warhol did a movie called Empire State Building. Remember?
Right.
Yeah.
It ran 6 hours.
Yeah.
The movie was 6 hours long. He put a camera in front of the Empire State Building, and for 6 hours, he filmed people going in and out of the Empire State Building. Now, I don't know who's crazy, Andy Warhol or anybody who sat through 6 hours of the Empire State Building, but that was called art back then.
And I think, though, when you were sitting there, you were on something.
Well, I think so, yeah.
We hope so.
I think
But for 6 hours, it had to be a good high, I'll tell you.
Tara?
I was just curious what your audience was.
Us.
Making ourselves laugh.
We wrote to make ourselves laugh. And I grew up, that's a great question. I grew up with Bugs Bunny cartoons and Rocky and Bullwinkle, which were cartoons written for adults, but they were on for kids. And the great thing about that was, as a kid, you still found it funny, but you don't know why, or you didn't get all the jokes. But later on, as an adult, and you watched them again, there were references there that you never got when you were a kid. There were just so many hip things. And when Tom Patchett had the same sense of humor I did, and we never wrote to the kids, and we said, we will write what we think is funny, and we will find the audience that laughs at what we think is funny, and by the way, that's called being true to yourself, and as a writer, that's very important, to be honest and to write from your heart and write what you know, and you will be successful if you write what you know. The hardest thing to do is to second guess somebody. And in comedy, the worst thing is, hey, I think this joke is funny, but that's my sensibility. I want to try to guess what she thinks is funny. So maybe I should write the joke down to her level or up to her, whatever it is. You're dead in the water if you do that. You write from here, and if it catches, you're in better shape.
When you're writing comedy for your level, did you end up getting any flack from NBC for those things?
The greatest thing was the jokes that we couldn't put in the show. All right?
I'll bet.
To me, the greatest experience was sitting in the writer's room and pitching jokes, because you've got 5, 8 hysterically funny people there, and for every joke that makes it into the script, just 15, 20 jokes that just are totally inappropriate or just uncalled for. And you're laughing so hard. And then as the arbitrator, as the head writer in the room, you have to decide, is this pushing the envelope? Is this, and then you've got to deal with censors, of course. There's certain things that are strictly taboo. I mean, you can't be doing those jokes. But there were, I'm trying to think if there was a joke that we pushed the limit on. The stuff NBC would bother us about was, we used to do jokes about Alf eating cats and Alf eating pets. And they really hated those jokes because some kid put a cat in a microwave because he heard Alf cooked a cat. And we got a lot of flack about that. So then we had to start doing those. Don't try this at home, those things. And we did an episode where Alf electrocuted himself in the bathtub.
He got a shock.
He wanted a jacuzzi, and the family wouldn't buy a jacuzzi for him. So he says, I'll make my own jacuzzi. I'm going to take a hairdryer in the bathtub with me and put it in the thing, and that's what's going to happen. And the whole premise of that was he was going to get an electric shock, and which would trigger amnesia. Well, we aired it, and don't you think that somebody tried putting a hairdryer in? They didn't get hurt. So the show was going to go into a rerun, and they made us change the opening.
We had to go back and reshoot.
We had to go back and reshoot the opening and not use the word. It changed from him being electrocuted to falling in the bathtub. That was it. He fell in the bathtub. So anyway, those were common sense things. But the pet eating thing was. He was talking about we had a Kentucky Fried Chicken on Melmac, but instead of chicken, it was dogs and cats, and it was later taken over by Mr. Bill's Pet Bake. We would do those kind of jokes, and they were saying, "Oh God, you guys can't do the pet jokes." And I said, "Come on, what are we talking about here?" But if there was any inappropriate jokes, I can't tell them at this time.
Dimmy?
Yeah, two things. First of all, the whole idea of writing for an alien, and the second was that you said that there are times when you can get away with saying something to a puppet because, after all, it's a puppet saying it. And did you ever find that because Alf was an alien, that he had the opportunity to say or comment on society in a way that you, as a real character, could never have done because they were inside the society, and Alf had that? I mean, Mort did that, and
Yeah.
Did you feel that gave you a whole range of possibilities?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and wonderful, because you could be didactic, but not appear to be. Alf would take a stand, and you don't want to be preachy, but yeah, it's such great observational humor from a character to be removed to say, what is it with you people? Why do you do things like this? One of Alf's things, he couldn't understand how they elect a pope. With the smoke, is it white? Is it black? With the chimney? What's that all about? The things that we take for granted, what we would laugh at.
Except that, yeah.
And yeah, that was, and his whole thing about, we ended up politically doing a thing for, we created a nonprofit organization at one point called Protect Our Planet, POP, that Alf was the chairperson for. And because you feel like a moral, when there was one point when Alf was so popular, he was more recognizable than Michael Dukakis. When Michael Dukakis was running for president, Alf was more recognizable than Michael Dukakis. That'll tell you what kind of society we were in. But
So Alf for president.
we did an Alf for president. We did an Alf for president, but we found out you can't run because he's an alien, and got to be the
Gotta be a
Schwarzenegger's finding that problem
Yeah, right.
now. So we ended up starting this PLP, Protect Our Planet, and Alf was trying to tell people recycle, don't pollute. This is what happened to my planet. We ruined it. Don't let it happen here. You guys got a nice planet. Don't let it go to hell. And there's an obligation there. So it was great to be able to use the character in that way. But the observational stuff is still, I say to this day, if we brought Alf back, I mean, the 1980s were certainly a kinder, gentler time as opposed to what we're going through now. And if Alf were on TV during the Monica Lewinsky years and so forth, boy, there's a lot of fodder there. There's a lot of... I just look at all the jokes we missed. Every time I pick up the paper, I'm saying, if we were on TV, boy, here's a lot of stuff here. You know, Paris Hilton, there's a lot of material here.
George Bush.
George Bush, yeah, all of them. All of them.
Fiona.
Hi, I was just interested in, obviously, you know, the character had a long time to develop, and obviously you knew you had something special, but did you have any idea of how big it was going to get, and when he did become, I mean, he's so, there's something about the character that obviously, you know, people can relate to globally. When it got to that point, were you sheltered from the
No.
craziness? Or
No, I stayed. I just basked in it. It was so. It was wonderful to. At the height of our popularity, we were getting 40,000 pieces of fan mail a week. And believe it or not, I tried to read all of them. That's how stupid I was. And then I finally had, and we answered most of them when people would request pictures and everything. We had a staff of people that would answer the fan mail, and I would always say to them, any real special one, pull it aside. I want to read the special ones, you know. And I would try to keep in touch with it. But no, when it became global, when it became big, it's still running in Germany. The show, they just renewed the show again in Germany. It's not been off. It's their I Love Lucy. It hasn't been off the air in Germany since we were on the air here in the 80s.
And they said it hadn't been off in Argentina.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I have to look into that. I'm not getting any residuals from there.
And they're not paying you for that.
No. They could be bootleg copies.
Is there any chance of a reunion?
I was supposed to ask that because I thought there was to be like 250 people, and I could say, somebody in California said, find out if anybody's interested in a reunion. See what kind of response you get from the audience, because maybe we could sell a reunion show. So you're interested? So we got one person interested in a reunion for two.
Oh, no.
All right. So I'll say if we could count how many people and do the math.
It's
What the percentage?
80%.
80% of the people in the audience said we should do a reunion show.
You gotta use all the jokes you couldn't use before.
Oh, I think we can. We can do them now.
Everybody's numb to them now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 20 years later, it has changed, and there's
Yeah.
and plus, if you go instead of network, if you go to one of the
Cable, yeah. Alf and the Sopranos.
you know, yeah, there you go, and you know, you have more freedom on some of those cable stations to do something that's a little wilder.
Oh, yeah,
Because,
yeah.
and they would love it, you know.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of thing they want. They want that edgy part.
I always protected the character in the sense that even if I did something that wasn't to be aired or anything, I never made him. I'll give you an example. Howard Stern asked me to do his show, which I thought would be kind of funny with Howard Stern and Alf. And I said, all right, well, we'll talk about it and everything. And then they sent us the premise. And the premise was they were doing a beauty pageant, and Alf was going to be one of the judges. But instead of, they were going to be porn stars. All right? And and they were real porn stars. He does this kind of stuff. And they said it'd be very funny if Alf is there interviewing these porn stars. And, you know, maybe they're topless and he's doing this thing. And I said, no. I said, I would never do that.
Yeah.
It's a cheap
character.
joke. I
Yeah.
would never bring the character there. I would never make the character do toilet humor or I mean it's from a writing point. It's a low shot. It's easy to do. You know, you could drop your pants and get a laugh anytime. I never did that, and I kept him pretty much straight and narrow, and I mean I got rough with him, but I never wanted him to be lecherous or seedy in any way. I couldn't do it to him.
And you were very careful about your endorsements.
Oh, I turned down. Stupid me. I turned down Coca-Cola and Budweiser beer. They were retiring Spud McKenzie, and Alf is another thing where the censors got us in the pilot. Alf used to drink beer. Alf liked beer, and you know he's 285 years old. He could drink beer. He's old enough. And as the show caught on in popularity with the kids, NBC would say, "You can't have him drinking. The kids are watching. It's a bad role model." And I said, "Well, I would make the same argument that he's an adult. He could do it and everything." Well, anyway, the beer thing kind of went away. But at the beginning, it wasn't. And they were Budweiser was retiring Spuds McKenzie, and they were looking for a new spokesperson. And they came to us and asked us if Alf would be the spokesperson for Budweiser beer. And I turned them down, as I did with Coca-Cola, and as I did with an Alf breakfast cereal that they wanted to do called Alfeos.
It's true. What was that like? What kind of cereal was that?
I said, I'll do it only if they're in the shape of Alf and they taste like Alf. That's the only way I'll do them. If not, I'm not going to do your, you know. I figured out something the other day. Fruit Loops are really gay Cheerios. If you think about it. It's the same thing. Anyway, see, that joke works. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, write that one
They
down.
are, it works. That would be an Alf observation. Now I'm looking at this box here, and there's really not a big difference between these two. It's just these are the gay Cheerios. So I would never want Alf to be over there pitching something. Buy this, buy my product. This is me. We did a Burger King promotion, and they wanted Alf to be pitching Burger King, and I said no, he can't appear in the commercials at all. I just had this protection thing about him selling himself, to say, here's my... Jim Henson was the same way when he was alive. He really didn't want his characters appearing on breakfast cereal because he was very anti-sugar at the time with the kids and everything, and he was very, very, very knowledgeable, and he knew what he was doing, and very... from the heart, And then after he died, the corporation took over, and Disney, who owns the Muppets now, they sold them down the river. There's everything you can imagine. The best one was the Muppet diapers, which I thought was a nice touch. But Disney will do anything for a buck, and they have. But I don't think Walt would have put Mickey on a diaper. I don't.
Other questions? Yeah, Angela.
The rigorous schedule that you talked about before, how did you fit in with the young actors? And obviously, they couldn't be there all the time, but they were in a lot of the shows.
Yes, they were. Well, the youngest was the boy, Benji. And in the real world, when he could only work, there's child labor laws, and I forget how many hours a day they can actually work, and they have to have school. So there's a tutor on the set that they're in school most of the time, and you pull them out of school to come and do their scene, and then in the back they converted one of the dressing rooms into a school room. And at that time, Andrea, the daughter, she was still in school too
For the first 2
for
years.
the first 2 years, and so there's not you see them, but they're pretty busy learning their lines and learning their schoolwork.
And they also, the shooting schedule, when the stage manager would do out the shooting schedule, they would put those people first. They would get their stuff, get their shots and everything so that they could be released. There were many times that we were there till 2 o'clock last.
I was the last one to be shooting a scene. Everybody would be released, and I'd be the only one on the set doing a scene. They'd always, they never protected me.
Oh.
But anyway.
Anyone else have questions? Yep, Josh.
I was younger, I used to watch Alf a lot.
You have good taste.
It was a while ago, so the timeline is kind of hazy for me. But the Alf cartoon, what did you have to do with that? Because you mentioned, you talked about how you knew the whole history, and I remember vaguely that it followed the history pretty well. There was, it was like a
It was before he came here.
Before he left
Yeah,
his planet.
yeah, it was his life on his planet.
How involved were you in that?
Very, because it came from, what I ended up doing with Alf was I wrote a Bible. You write a Bible for the character and everything, and it came from that Bible of his brother, his sister, his mother, his father, what their names were, what kind of job the father had and everything, and I took it to the animators and said, this is the world that they live in, these are Alf's friends, this is his relationship, and then we hired cartoon writers to come up with the storylines. And I would see the storylines, and I would read the scripts too, and give as many notes as I could. But it was pretty much done at that point.
And that's something he did several voices in the animated show, and they would pull him off, not on shoot days, but on rehearsal days. Many times he'd be across town at recording studios
Anything
doing
to get out of rehearsing.
Instead of...
That's right. Sometimes I would pretend I was at voiceover studios doing voices, and I'd be home or whatever, hiding. I didn't want to be rehearsing.
Anyone else have questions, or you can join us, and Paul and Linda will have a cup of coffee
As
and
usual,
some
we have
dessert.
coffee and delicious cookies.
Cookies.
In the reception here, so
And
please stay
you can
with us
talk to
and
them
chat with us.
How many
some more.
people came just for the cookies?
Dimitri,
I knew that.
thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much.